You just take this dump truck full of facts and you back it up on them and just drown them in the data.
That's it.
Welcome to the Investment Property Geeks of Charlotte. We're your hosts,
Chris. Wow.
We're leaving it in.
Yeah, I like
What's your name again?
You know what? I'm pretty sure it's Jesse. Wow, we just talked about it. We just talked about it. Wow.
We're your hosts, Chris and Jesse. I don't know how to recover from that.
I don't think you do. I think, like you said, we're just gonna roll with it. I like it. This is episode 12. So
yeah,
there it is.
It's not 13. Wait, tune in for 13. It's gonna be really unlucky.
Just wait till you see how that one goes. But yeah, how do we recover? But on that note, today, oh no, wow, we're really screwing this up. We'd like for you to leave us a review and subscribe. My gosh, I don't know if they're going to leave a review if this is the first episode
this is going to be real. Yeah, I know. Well, hey, go back. I promise we did some that were okay before.
It sounded way better from the earlier episodes. But yes, please do leave us a review and click that subscribe button or go to investmentpropertygeeks.com. You can also email us at podcast@investmentpropertygeeks.com. And you can also like us on Facebook. Multiple ways to communicate with us.
Good job, Jesse.
Yeah, I don't know.
Or should I say Chris?
Yeah, well, whatever. So today we're talking about the beginning of the end, move-outs, and security deposit disposition. When your tenant is ready to leave, what does that look like?
Exactly, and what do you do, and what's allowed? Now, here, we're going to give kind of a disclaimer. So we are not attorneys. Nothing we're about to say is legal advice.
I feel like we say that a lot.
Please consult your lease and your legal counsel for legal counsel. With that said, we'll give you some tips and policies that we have and whatnot from a professional broker perspective. Now, we are both licensed real estate brokers, so we are able to speak to that regard. But definitely, this is not legal counsel. So make sure you understand in your and two, laws can change over time. So what we talk about today may not be relevant a couple years from now if you're listening to this down the road. So anyway, all right. So what is the first thing about when a tenant moves out or is going to move out? What does that look like? Like, what do you need to have in place? First and foremost, just make sure that you've got some sort of system for getting notice of the tenant vacating. I almost said of that vacation.
I heard
because I'm thinking vacation right now because I could really use one. But I do love my job, but I could use a vacation. But anyway, have a system for getting notice. This feels like episode 1.
No, actually, before you go any further, I know what this is. For anyone out there listening, it's the mid-afternoon. Like, you just get a little loopy. Like you need a sugar rush or something.
Last time we were smart and we had coffee.
Yes.
And this was stupid. We have no coffee. So I apologize. You guys who are listening, please don't lower the rating just because we did not caffeinate. Our fault.
That's on us.
Don't put that in the review. Okay. All right. Anyway, meanwhile, back on the farm. Have a system for getting notice. That could be pretty simple. Just make sure you set the expectation with your tenant of what that's going to be. So, hey, are they going to be sending you an email? For us, we've got a portal for them, that kind of thing. If they forget to give notice and give us notice via email, we'll go ahead and submit the notice in the portal and just know what to look for there, or maybe give a phone call. You should have pretty clear expectations set out in your lease that you review with the tenant when it's coming time for renewal. We talked about that last time. And if they're choosing not to renew or you weren't able to negotiate that renewal with them, then the other option is vacate. So here we are. We're vacating now, not vacationing, vacating, because vacating is not vacationing. We could say that much for sure. Okay, so have we already said that. All right, have a checklist for what to do. Ideally, if you do this enough, well, I guess there's really no argument to not have a checklist, because if you don't do it very often, you're going to want a checklist because you're going to forget stuff, and if you do it all the time, you don't want to do the same stupid thing over and over again. So have a checklist.
It's the definition of insanity.
Yeah. Right? So either way, have a checklist. And it doesn't need to be super complicated, but it does need to kind of remind you of some things that are important to do, especially when we get down to security deposit compliance. Some unfortunately, landlords of the past have kind of given us all a black eye and set us up for failure. And now there are very strict laws that protect tenant security deposits because, unfortunately, some slumlords out there, in the past at least, will hopefully not now, have really abused the tenant security deposit and kind of seen it as their own money when it's not. So now we've got some pretty strict laws that help protect the tenant, which is all a good thing, but it does make life slightly more challenging.
You raise a really good point, Chris, because a lot of people do think as an owner, that's their money. That's not.
And legally it's not.
Right.
Legally, this is kind of an interesting point. So even if the tenant gives you a security deposit, you are legally holding on to someone else's money until they cause damage and you appropriately charge them for that damage, assuming you charge them correctly for the expense you actually incurred, which is what we'll get to in a little bit. But if you never charge them correctly or you never actually get it repaired, that money is still legally the tenant's money. Mm-hmm. And so that's why there are a lot of laws around it. And you can kind of imagine that, like, hey, you're carrying around, you're liable for someone else's money. And that's why we keep those in like a trust or escrow account. And actually by law, as an investor, go search the North Carolina or South Carolina, depending on where you are, North Carolina Tenant Security Deposit Act. And it very clearly articulates in there that you have to place those funds in a trust or escrow account. They're called the same thing. And guess what? It's not as simple as you just open a checking account. You have to have a specified trust or escrow account. Or in the state of North Carolina, you can get a bond, but that's way more complicated and difficult. So I guarantee you most of the folks listening to this are probably playing a little bit fast and loose with that and probably don't have it in a trust or escrow account would be my guess. And I just want to let you know, technically that's against the law. And if the real estate commission were to find out about that, technically you could, I guess, I don't know what they would do to you. Get a demerit. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know that I don't know if it's jail time. I doubt it's jail time, but it might. And I don't know if they can fine you. I know they can't fine agents. So I've always kind of wondered that. I should ask the commission sometime, like, hi, how does that work? If you're not an agent, how do you enforce that? But I don't know. I'm sure there's something someone could do. And at the end of the day, I think if there's a security deposit dispute, potentially a judge could look at you and say, hey, Mr. Landlord or hey, Mrs. Landlord, show me the account that this deposit was held in.
Exactly. So,
and then you are hosed.
Yeah, don't put yourself in that position. Regardless if the real estate commission or someone else can fine you. I mean, they can't send you to prison or anything, but it doesn't matter. Just don't put yourself in that position.
Yeah, and I think, you could have a dispute on a security deposit even if you're being super fair.
Absolutely.
I mean, we get them all the time. We had one recently where we were being super fair with a tenant and they just kind of were indignant and they thought I shouldn't have to pay anything. And it's like, well, but the paint that you put on the wall and you tried to cover up doesn't even match. And so technically that's damage. And they're like, oh, nope, I'm challenging that. And so if you don't have your T's crossed and your I's dotted, good luck when you go to court to fight that, if you choose to go to court. Usually that's not worth it. But anyway, I digress. Okay, so have a checklist for what to do. That's part of it. Get your trust account set up. Put the security deposit in a trust account. If you have no idea what that is and you have no interest in learning, please give it to someone who has a trust account, like a respectable property management company. Most general brokerages now anymore, they don't even have trust accounts. So make sure you go with like a reputable licensed property manager and ask the question, do you have a trust account that complies with the North Carolina Tenant Security Deposit Act? Okay. Now, and it's not just, by the way, it's not just the trust account. You've actually got to do some things about reconciling that trust account and keeping records and how you account for entries in and out of there. It's a whole complicated mess, but that's one of the compliance things we take on for you. Make sure that on your checklist, you're referencing those interim inspections. So when the tenant gives you that notice they're going to move out, go back and look at pictures from before just to jog your memory of what all might need to be done to that property and start thinking about lining up any big projects you might have. So if you know you're going to replace the flooring and you know it's a long lead for flooring, hey, go ahead and get that scheduled now. If you know that you wanted to upgrade the appliances and they're long lead, go ahead and get those on order. Be thinking too about order of operations. So make sure when you do that turnover that you're not doing the cleaning first. We will typically do everything, and then you bring the cleaners in second to last and the carpet cleaners in very last. So be thinking about that. Anything that's going to create the most mess and destruction, get that done first.
Yeah.
Then go ahead and do all your repairs. Then typically your painting, then flooring, then painting touch-up, and then cleaning and carpet cleaning. So that's a good operation, order of operations to follow.
Chris, you asked me before if I had any examples. You just reminded me of one, actually.
Okay, perfect.
There was one apartment complex that I lived in one of my many, many moves, and they did the carpet cleaning first, and then they brought in, they had to do spackling. They had to repair part of the ceiling. So, So
Why not?
yeah. By the time I moved in, it looked terrible. So don't put yourself in that position. Just do, like Chris said, do the mess first, and then let that be the absolute last thing you do, so those carpets can dry. That place is immaculate for the next tenant to move in.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Jesse. I appreciate you bringing that up. Awesome. Let's see, Jesse. What else do we want to do? So we're going to look and see if there's anything that needs to be done. And then what?
We want to advertise the property. 30 to 45 days, ideally.
Mm-hmm.
But, very important, do not show the property if it's not ready. We talked a little bit about this before. If you have a tenant in there that is a slob,
Yep.
don't go show that to another future tenant, because you're just going to attract another slob.
Yeah, and even if the property, like even if the tenant's living real nice, but you know the property needs to be fixed up, and then, hey, I'm going to go bump up rent by a couple $100, don't show it.
Yeah.
I get people all the time, they're like, hey, but we'll just tell them what we're going to do.
Nah, it doesn't work.
It doesn't work.
Mm-mm.
Like, that doesn't work. And you're going to potentially turn them off forever if you show it to them now. It's kind of like if you list your car for sale, right? Like, let's say, I don't know, anyone has ever sold their own car, and like the leather's all scratched and it's got mud caked on it and everything. And you go to sell it, you have nice pictures, but then you go to sell it and you tell the buyer, like, oh, hey, by the way, when you go out to the bank, I'll get all this fixed. Don't worry. Like, heck no, they're not going to the bank.
Yeah. You're not instilling confidence in anyone at that point. So it's the same thing here.
Yeah, exactly. Same exact thing here. Here's something that you should be doing as soon as a tenant gives you notice. And then again, like a week or so before, give them a checklist, like find, and maybe at some point we'll put out a free tool or something like that, or a little nugget. Give them like a move out and cleaning checklist, something that they can print that goes room by room, that shows them what all the expectations are for cleaning and kind of getting things ready. Don't forget to put some helpful things on there, like how do they get their mail forwarded? Maybe you give them a little link to the USPS site. How about changing the batteries in the smoke alarms? Technically, they're supposed to do that. Standard North Carolina lease says to do that. I think it's even mentioned in the rental code, but doesn't mean that they remember to do it. Give them the phone number for the best carpet cleaner in town to call, or the best cleaner in town to call. Make life easy for them. Moving sucks.
Yeah.
It's stressful.
Right.
No one likes it. Even if you hire movers, it still sucks. If you do it on your own, which most tenants do, it double sucks.
Yeah.
So just make life easy for them.
Yeah. Well, to that end, Chris, help them help you. And that's really what this is. I mean,
exactly. And on top of our cleaning checklist, it says, hey, look, we want you to get back 100% of your security deposit.
we've said this before.
We
Yeah.
absolutely do, because it's so much easier when that happens, because then you're not arguing about it. You don't have to coordinate maintenance. It's less vacancy. You can turn around and show it right away. You don't have to. I mean, it's better for everybody. Now, don't get me wrong. At the end of the day, we will deduct the maximum amount allowed by law to make sure our owners are covered whole. But I would way rather just set the bar really high for the tenant and help coach them through what to do to get it clean than I would to go take money from their deposit and do it ourselves. It's just more work. It's a lot of work, actually. There's a lot of work around deducting money from a security deposit and compliance with all that. So it has to be done. You know, most tenants, unfortunately, don't get back their full deposit. Usually there's a little bit that you have to take. But anyway, give them that checklist to help try to set them up for success. And don't be that person. Like, don't be the person that's like, hey, they're an awesome tenant. They paid me every time on the first, and they left one light bulb burned out. So here's $100 deducted from your security deposit. Like, one, you suck if you do that.
You've got to be reasonable with this stuff.
And two, like, I mean, you could charge for it, but don't make it ridiculous or exorbitant. It has to be kind of actual cost and that kind of thing. So yeah, help them be successful. And, coach them up over the phone if they have questions or whatnot before they leave the property. Just like coach them on kind of what your expectations are and what to do. And also, too, let them know, here's what we put on our move out checklist is we say, make sure you leave utilities on through the end of your lease. Because if you don't, we've got to call the utility company, see when you turned off power or gas or whatever. And then we have to wait for that bill to come back before we can disposition your security deposit because we don't know how much it's going to be. And that's a nightmare. Like who wants to do that? Wait for a bill to come back? Because some of these utility companies take 45 days. And then it's just like, ugh, what a nightmare. All right. Then, and two, when they do that move out, make sure ideally you're keeping the power and the gas and stuff on and the water on. So when you do showings, the power and stuff is on. If it's the middle of summer, you don't want it being 90 degrees in there and plus mold and stuff building up in your HVAC ducts. And when it's a winter, you don't want pipes freezing because a tenant moved out. So, make sure to get that power back in your name right away. And something I should have mentioned earlier too, if you don't already have some sort of revert to owner or landlord agreement set up with your utility company, before the tenant moves out is the best time to do that so that as soon as they kick those utilities off, they automatically go back into your name and you avoid gaps in service.
Yep. Which could be very problematic depending upon the time of year you were in.
Yep, exactly. So there's another nugget for you. The RTO, as it's called in the biz. Probably didn't want to know that. As I think my father-in-law I heard this phrase from him. My wife and I use it sometime as like, wow, there's another penguin that fell off the ice. Like, the whole idea of like, you got this little patch of ice and only so many penguins can fit on it. And that's like, what's all the knowledge in your brain. And like, sometimes when a new penguin comes on, it has to bump one off the ice. And so now that you know RTO, I just bumped a penguin off the ice.
We apologize in advance.
All right. Make sure when you do the move out, you're actually going to go do a property inspection and get some great photos of anything that's damaged. Even beyond what you're going to charge the tenant for, anything that you're going to have repaired, because you're going to kind of want to be able to come back to an office environment or whatever, somewhere where it's a little more convenient and kind of document down what all it is that you need to do and hopefully create some work orders or some instructions for your handyman or whatever to use. So yeah, get good photos though from a few different angles, ideally, of the damage. And what I find is helpful too is sometimes you have a photo of the damage and you don't remember what the photo was a month later. So put your finger next to what the damage is and take a photo with your finger in it. That also really helps for like stains or patches on walls, because it's hard sometimes when you zoom in, you lose perspective on like how big of a stain is it really. Yeah. So if you put your finger in there, or if you don't want your finger in there, take a pen or something with you.
Yeah, have a point of reference.
Yeah, and put a pen in there so that you can, one, point to what the damage actually is, and two, you have a reference exactly like Jesse said for how big it is. Because it'd be pretty easy to argue like, hey, that stain's only the size of a dime. Why'd you charge me $300, to remove it? And the judge says, yes, Mrs. Landlord, why did you charge him $300 to remove it? And you go, because look at my pen. It's, it's huge compared to the pens.
Prime example. I was out at a property. Actually, we were out at a property last week, and I took some photos of the ceiling that looked horrible. Just like blotchy and it was discolored. And when I looked at the photos, I said to myself, man, this doesn't look as bad in the photos as it did in person. I remember that. So just having a reference point and having some way to be able to say, all right, well, it actually is bigger than I think it is just from looking at this photo makes a difference. And to Chris's point, like that's something you can go back to a tenant and say, well, here's not damage per se, but here's something that it doesn't look right. And train's going off the track over here, Chris.
Okay. Yeah. Anyway, photos.
Yeah. But yeah, I'm trying to reiterate the issue. Just, have a reference point, because the photos do not always they don't always serve you well.
Yep. We've beat that horse.
Have we ever?
Okay. Which kind of begs to reiterate, like we had in the past, the importance of the move-in inspection. So a long time ago, we talked about moving in. Now we're talking about moving out. And we said one of the most important things about moving in is begin with the end in mind, because move out. And here we are, move out. So now, while the move-in is not required by law in North Carolina, and it is in other states, rightfully so, it is a best practice, and it is something that's really going to help you substantiate any sort of deductions. I will say this, we're pretty uncomfortable as a company when we get a property that comes with no move-ins, which let's be honest, most owners that I see that have been managing on their own don't do a move-in. You are setting yourself up for failure. So do the move-in or have someone do it for you. End of that story. So, but anyway, it gives you a really great way to compare and contrast the before and the after photos of each room, especially if you have a structured move-in that goes in to, kind of area by area and that kind of thing. And it really helps outline and mitigate. It doesn't completely absolve all the arguments you might have with the tenant about their security deposit, but it really helps to say, hey, Mr. Tenant, I appreciate the fact that you don't think you caused that damage, but here's a 50-page report with photos, high resolution, side by side, that are time-stamped and geotagged and color-coded by condition by room that shows the condition on move-in and move-out, and then the itemized list of everything that we deducted from the deposit, and you'll see those things tie up. And it's kind of like you just take this dump truck full of facts and you back it up on them and just drown them in the data.
That's it.
And you're just trying to like minimize the arguments that come with that. And you'll still have some folks that disagree and that kind of thing. But anyway, helps. Make sure that you go ahead and change the locks. Very important. Most tenants are going to be good and it's totally fine. But again, you're just trying to mitigate risk to the property. So as soon as they move out, go ahead, get over there, change the locks, have a locksmith do it. You do it. We use like the, for the regular deadbolts, we do like the quick set smart key. Some people argue, hey, it's not the most robust on the market. Yeah, but it's good for landlords because you can change them quick and easy. And then, take this opportunity to just do some freshening up of the property, like landscaping, trimming the bushes, cleaning the gutters, maybe planting some more grass, refreshing the bark or the mulch, that kind of thing.
That's an easy one too, and something that's so often overlooked. The house can look absolutely perfect from the exterior, but that ground cover, the mulch, the pine straw, whatever the case, just freshen it up. That's a cheap and easy fix.
Yep, give it a good thorough cleaning and good, carpet cleaning. Make sure if it needs to be painted or that kind of thing, do that too. So, all right, let's get onto the meat and potatoes of dispositioning the security deposit. What all of you tuned in for. And again, this is kind of where, this is not legal advice, but here's kind of some of the things that we are thinking about as we go through dispositioning the security deposit.
There it is.
All right. So a little bit of differences in rules in North Carolina and South Carolina. In North Carolina, at least you got to do the interim accounting within 30 days. So you won't, basically what that means is you got to say to the tenant, hey, here's everything that I am going to deduct so far, all the charges to date. And here's an estimate of what I expect is going to be deducted in the future for these specific things. I'm really sorry that we can't give you your deposit back yet because we're still waiting for the costs to come in for these things. That in North Carolina is okay. You can do that. In North Carolina, you have to have the final accounting and any refund of the deposit to the tenant within 60 days. So if you're lazy or something happened and it took you 90 days to get the repairs done, sorry, Charlie, can't withhold it from the security deposit. You've got 60. So that's why it's important to jump on this stuff right away, especially right now. Contractors are crazy busy.
Yeah.
And not all contractors are very good at invoicing right away. Some folks are not great at that. So get on it as fast as possible. Now in South Carolina, you've got 30 days for both. You got to give them the whole enchilada and refund and everything within 30. So be mindful of that. There are things you can deduct from the tenant's security deposit. Remember, it is not your money. It is a tenant's money. There are things that are non-deductible. So, Jesse, what are some things that are deductible and considered damage?
Carpet stains.
Okay.
See that quite often.
Yeah. And I think carpet stains is even kind of a gray area where, dirty carpets are not the same as like a pink wine stain or a red wine stain. So we're talking like a discrete, like dirty spots. I don't know.
Slope.
I don't know. Is it legal? Depends on which magistrate you get. Like honestly,
yeah,
like that's
true.
A lot of this stuff. That's kind of what we're told. We get told by our attorney, or even in class. They're like, you're like, well, is this legal? And they're like, depends on the judge. So you want to try to avoid that area where it's going to depend on the judge, and you want things that are kind of, yeah. So like, yeah, absolutely. If there's a pink stain in the carpet, that's damage.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no doubt.
Yep.
Yeah, and I think if you have good, proper documentation from move in, or if that damage was done throughout your routine inspections, you're able to say, hey, look, this was not in the condition that we are now finding it in. So,
yep, absolutely.
Yep. Another thing is mismatched paint on the walls, and then like marks. So if a 5-year-old went and took a marker or a crayon and went down the hallway, and this happens.
Yeah.
That's damage.
Yep. And not, I don't want to scare people. Not very often do we see crayons on the walls and that kind of thing, but you do see sometimes like maybe someone, I don't know, did something else stupid.
Oh, yeah.
Or an accidental. And yeah, that's usually what it is. The last one that we did that really stunk because the tenants had great intentions was they went and they hired a painter on move out to go paint the whole house because they just they had some smudges and scuffs and things. Well, the painter didn't do the world's best job, and they used a slightly different shade of paint, but they didn't paint the entire wall. They touched up. And so what would have not been damage, likely, what would have just been normal wear and tear, they turned into damage because now they have all this paint that they had someone go put on the walls that is technically damage. Whereas before, had it just been a little bit dirty, we wouldn't have been able to charge them for it. We even called the real estate commissioner, like, hey, we just want to double check and make sure. And they're like, oh yeah, from our perspective, that's damage. Now, depending on what the magistrate says, don't know. But from our perspective, that's damage. So yeah, absolutely. Or if you never gave someone permission to paint the walls, or your lease doesn't allow for it, and they chose to like, hey, we have a nursery and we want to paint it pink, and you never allowed that explicitly, that's damage, even if it's done well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. What else?
Also, if the house, and we have to be careful with this one, is exceptionally filthy.
Yeah, that's a tough. Usually we'll see this if like there might be like an appliance that's exceptionally filthy. The North Carolina, now this is where North Carolina might differ from other states. You can't charge people, you can't deduct from a tenant's security deposit routine cleaning. So that's considered an expense of owning rental property. And so, even like if the oven has some crumbs and stuff in it, that's not exceptionally filthy. You can't charge them for that. But we had someone move out recently where there was a plethora of dog hair left like in the dryer. Now, I still think this is a little bit of a slippery slope. We charged them for it because I said that's exceptionally filthy and disgusting. So we're going to charge them to pull out the dog hair. Now, I don't know, how would that hold up in court? You got to figure that out and kind of what your comfort level is. But yeah, usually that doesn't happen for the entire house, but it's usually like, hey, there's an area of the house that's exceptionally filthy that you could charge for. Again, that language is incredibly vague. So when in doubt, don't charge. All right. So some non-deductible items, some things that you cannot charge from the tenant security deposit. We already kind of hinted at some of this, but there are going to be a couple things on here that might kind of surprise you a little bit. But Jesse, what are some of those items?
Yeah. So we kind of teed it up, like you said, normal wear and tear of the tenant just living in the home.
Yep.
Yeah, that's a non-deductible.
Just things that happen just by, hey, I'm using the house like a normal human being would.
Right.
And by the way, like on our house, we don't walk with shoes on the carpet, but normal wear and tear would include walking with shoes on the carpet. Mm-hmm. So to me, that's exceptionally filthy in my mind, my personal mind. But as a investor and as a property manager, it's not, unfortunately. Wearing shoes in the house and the wear that comes on the carpet and the dirt that comes with that, normal wear and tear. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of gross to a lot of people. But yeah, that's normal wear and tear. So just realize that how you live may not be kind of considered quote unquote normal by by the courts.
Right.
Yep. What else?
Another one, ends of blind strings.
Yeah, so this is kind of funny. Same with like the little ends on the fans or the pull strings on the fans. Now again, I think it could be argued either way. We've received guidance in the past by folks who are at the commission who teach classes like, hey, guess what? If someone's just using a fan throughout the normal course of their day, eventually those little pull strings and stuff pull off and break. That's normal wear and tear. Like, oh, okay, I guess that kind of makes sense. Because on the surface you see it and you're like, hey, those buggers, they broke my fan, you know, or they some kid pulled the ends off those blind strings. Now I got to go replace a whole blind, blah, 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 you know, and it's like, well, I guess if I was using that on a normal basis, like after a couple years, it might break.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, same thing if like a doorknob loosens or something like that. Like you're not going to charge them for that. Or if a toilet paper holder falls off, we see this one a lot. Toilet paper holder falls off the wall. Probably not damage.
Yeah.
Probably normal wear and tear.
Exactly.
Unless there's like a big old dent right next to it or something.
Yeah, unless it's like overtly obvious that something had been damaged or they had done something to cause that.
Yeah. And that's usually tough to kind of prove.
Yeah, exactly.
And again, give them the benefit of the doubt. You know, go put the thing back on the wall, tighten it back up.
Right. Call it a day.
Go. Yeah, exactly.
Dirty items, but not exceptionally dirty items. We have to be careful.
Yeah, and you have to be careful again. That word exceptionally filthy. What does that really mean? But yeah, dirty items. So if someone leaves like dirt in the windowsill, sorry.
Yep, can't charge.
Not charging them. Hey, the back patio is kind of dirty. I'm going to have to power wash it off. Sorry, can't charge them. Hey, there are crumbs left on the counter. Sorry, can't charge them. So now this one I'll always charge for. Oh, they forgot to clean out the fridge and the freezer and they left me last week's pizza. I'm charging.
Yep.
I consider that exceptionally filthy. That's not normal wear and tear.
That's reasonable.
That's yeah, that's a reasonable thing. So you can usually charge for stuff like that. Now you can't charge them an arm and a leg.
Right.
And we'll talk about that in a minute.
Also, and we talked about this already, routine cleaning.
Yep. So we just kind of hit on that. Don't charge for the cleaners to go in there and clean up the place.
Exactly.
If you do have cleaners go in there and clean up the place, which we highly recommend you do because you want it professionally cleaned, if there is something that is obviously exceptionally filthy and you feel comfortable charging them for that, then ask the cleaners to break out what did that portion of the cleaning cost.
When Chris is talking about a cleaning, we're talking about a deep cleaning. If you don't know the difference between a deep cleaning and a regular cleaning, hire someone.
And just because you have a cleaner, like let me tell you this too, the people who clean your house on a regular basis, on a monthly basis, it's not the same thing as a deep cleaning.
No, that's true.
Very different. Deep cleanings are, in fact, sometimes those companies don't even know what a deep cleaning is.
Hire a different company.
You got to hire a different company that really understands what a deep cleaning is for a move in and a move out.
Absolutely.
All right. So there are a couple more requirements around dispositioning the security deposit that you got to make sure you're in line with. Otherwise, you're going to get in hot water, which we don't want you to do. So here's one. What you can deduct from the security deposit is limited to the actual. I'm going to get the phrasing of anyway, it's limited to the actual costs that you incurred as the owner to repair that item. So let me give you a couple examples. Let's say the tenant accidentally puts the car into reverse for a little bit too long and backs into the garage door. That could happen. And it's a little dent. You look at it and you're like, wow, that sucks. I should really charge him for that, which is a reasonable thought. You better go get it fixed because what you can't do is you can't say, I'll charge him for that, but it's probably going to be okay. But at some point I'm going to have to replace that. And so I want a little bit of money now because a couple years down the road, I'm probably going to have to replace it. And it's only fair that, I take it from their deposit. No, it might be fair, but it's not legal. So you can't deduct anything for that damage unless you had someone come out and physically fix the door. And then you can only deduct what it actually costs to physically fix the door. Now, let's say you're really handy and you got a mallet in the back of your truck and you pop that thing back into place. Too bad. You just did that for free. You can't deduct for that because, again, you have to be able to quantify to the court. This is the damage that it actually costs my wallet is kind of the way to think about it. So like the actual cost out of my pocket, this is what it costs me. And so that's what you can deduct from the security deposit. Well, my time's worth X dollars an hour. Yeah, good luck. I'm not saying it couldn't happen, but we've been advised to not allow owners to fix stuff by our legal counsel, not allow owners to fix stuff for that reason, because It's way more black and white to say this is the invoice that I got from the person I hired to do the repair. So think about it this way. The security deposit money is never really yours. It either belongs to you or it belongs to the vendor. It either belongs to the tenant or it belongs to the vendor. Never really, you might be in possession of it, but it's never your money. So, it's either the tenant's money, it's a vendor's money, or it's a tenant's money that you're refunding back to.
Yep.
Like those are the possible options. So never think about it as your money, even if the tenants cause damage.
Yeah. Great point.
All right. So, I think we kind of covered that area. So it's your what you can deduct is only limited to, what you actually pay someone else to go do the repair. Now you must also, in North Carolina, in the Tenant Security Deposit Act, it does state that you have to have an itemized list of the repairs. Now, another area where it's a little bit vague. What does itemized list mean? Does that mean, hey, if I had a plumber and a handyman and electrician over, I have to give a list that says I deducted $200 for plumbing damages, I deducted $150 for handyman damages, and $300 for electrician damages? I don't know. Again, it probably depends on the judge. We choose to go much more detailed than that, where we try to make it like based on specific damage. So if it's like, hey, stains in carpet, it costs this much to have the carpet cleaner in to remove the stains in the carpet. And then we might break out, if we had a handyman, it was like, had to replace 5 light bulbs, this much money. Chipped mirror, this much money. Left food in refrigerator, this much money. And so, you don't need to get, I guess what I would say is we're cautious about getting overly specific so that a tenant doesn't come back and say, what do you mean you charge me $75 for X? But at the same time, you want to be very fair and transparent with them, and you want to make sure you're complying with the law around itemizing the stuff you're deducting.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say put as much information as possible without, seeming like you're coming down harsh on the tenant, because you want to be transparent. You want to make sure they understand exactly why they're being charged X. Yeah,
and it needs to be fair and reasonable too. So if a judge feels like, don't go tell your handyman like, charge whatever, I don't care. It's the tenant's like, oh, or here, how about this? Why don't you paint that wall for free, quote unquote, and charge me extra on all these damaged items? You can't do that either, obviously, for obvious reasons. So just be careful about stuff like that. And then, again, we already said this, but it's highly recommended that you've got that move-in report and the move-out, and you do it side by side, or give them both just to remind them. People are very forgetful, especially around like damage maybe that they made. Or quite honestly, I think what happens a lot of times, like if people live with roommates or they have kids, they may not realize that they are the ones who damaged it. And you might have to go, no, actually, I know you remember it being that way, but guess what? It was that way because on day 2, your toddler did that. That kind of thing. So, yeah. And then, hey, be reasonable. Like, don't need to nickel and dime folks, especially if they've been great tenants, and give them the benefit of the doubt. If it's a gray area and you're like, hey, this could have just broken, or you could have broken it, give them the benefit of the doubt. At the end of the day, they're still the customer. We'll talk about that. But you also have to remember it's your money and it's your return, and you're doing this for your reasons, whether you're saving for retirement or you've got to pay for another house or a kid's college or whatever. Don't also let the tenant get away with not paying for something they very clearly owe you, because that's like saying, hey, it's okay if you just come into my house and take my iPad or whatever. You know what I mean? Like, no, that's not okay. So, most tenants know when they break something, like they'll own up to it and be like, yeah, I'm not getting my deposit back for that. Sorry, but we had a party, whatever, and something fell, and I know I'm not going to get my deposit back for that much. So just be reasonable.
Yeah. And we said this in another episode, this is a business transaction, for all the reasons Chris just mentioned. This is your home. You're saving for something, you're paying something. So treat it as a business transaction. Be reasonable, but be conscientious of the fact that it is your money.
Absolutely. All right. Here we are.
It.
At the end,
we've done it.
We hope that was really valuable. Kind of like we always say, hopefully there are some really solid nuggets in there that you can go implement. The big things are document, get photos, be reasonable, know the law. And if you don't, or that all sounds like way too much work, hire somebody. It's not that much money to go hire a property manager. They're going to save you and make you way more money than they cost you. I promise, if they're good. If they're not, they could cost you way more than they make you or save you. But if they're good, they should end up making or saving you money, and they will especially save you time, which is the most valuable resource
Just gonna
all
say,
of us have.
Ask yourself, what's the most valuable use of your time? If it's sitting out there trying to disposition, a tenant security deposit, that's fine. But if you'd rather be doing something better and not having to worry about the legality of it, that's where an effective property manager can definitely help out.
Well, I'll say this. This is what we do for a living, and we have systems set up to do this.
Yeah.
And to do it correctly and by the law, dispositioning a security deposit for a tenant with all these things that are involved, doing the move out inspection, give them the inspection list, everything. It's several hours worth of work for us, and we do tons of them. So if you're really going to do this well as an owner and not be lazy about it and do it as detailed as a professional management company would, it's going to take you way longer than that. Because let's be honest, you don't have the same systems. You haven't been down the learning curve. You're not doing it all day, every day, and you're probably going to make some mistakes that might end up in hot water. So, if it takes us a few hours to do it, think about, like Jesse said, like, what is your time worth, and do you really want to be doing this, once every couple years or every year or whatever?
Yeah, great point.
Yeah. Anyway.
Well, with that, I think that's a good way to end.
Yeah, good segue.
Yeah, there it is. We are the Investment Property Geeks of Charlotte. Don't forget to subscribe. Leave us a review on Facebook or really anywhere. Thank you so much for listening. And this is Jesse and Chris. I got it right this time. Wishing you a brighter life through real estate.